live. We've got some reactions coming on here. Going to give it a little bit of time for folks to get logged in here at the top of the hour. So we'll begin as we get some viewers coming on.
Sounds good.
That is assuming everyone isn't, counting all the ad spend that happened over the Cyber 5 and still trying to compile.
Cyber 5, like everybody figuring out, counting all their money. Hopefully knowing about all the glitches that you typically run through. Did my promo actually run? Did they shut it off due to profitability? Is my boss going to kill me?
Yeah, exactly. Looks like we've got some folks signing on, John. Folks who are just joining, I'm with Jonny Denny of CAVU Ventures. My name's Nick Weinheimer. I lead e-commerce with Kenshu. We'll get started in just a moment. Let a few folks get off their last calls. We were just joking. They're probably compiling reports from the Cyber 5 still and getting back to clients, making sure the CFO and CEO are aware of all the great success that happened. So stay tuned. We'll get started with John in just a minute here.
Now it's become Prime Day and Cyber 5, the tense days of the year for all of us.
Exactly. I mean, that's the Prime Day. It's going to be Prime Month. It's just like July is a shopping month.
Let's just make it Prime Year. How about?
Yeah.
We make a lot of money, so let's just go with it.
Exactly. Well, I think we should get started. We have a small group getting started today. Folks that think, coming off the shopping holiday. Really excited to be joined by Jonny Denny on this, one of our first few Ask the Expert series, Kenshu eCommerce. Jonny Denny, you're with CAVU Ventures, a scion of the digital marketing. We've been catching up over the last 20 minutes or so, and then previously about your past. Really an interesting past. I'd love to, maybe if you could give a quick introduction of yourself and then who CAVU Ventures is, and we'll begin.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting ride, and it definitely, talking a little bit about where I've come from, will help color my lens of Amazon. And so, as you said, I'm with CAVU Venture Partners. I've been here for about 2 years, and I work within the team focused on accelerating our portfolio brands. So we have a team of folks who will work with, once we make an investment, we come right in like your Formula One pit crew, and we're there to accelerate everything that they do. And we typically work with some pretty high growth brands. So, in talking about Amazon, and a lot of it's colored, also with my experience with CAVU, and my path to CAVU was colored by my experience with Buy. So CAVU had a major investment in Buy. I started with Buy in about 2013 when it was a tiny company, a few million in sales. And that brand had been founded by a guy by the name of Ben Weiss. Shortly before that, in the basement of his Princeton townhouse. So here was a guy who would love to mix up things. He was a serial entrepreneur. He'd mix up beverage in his basement, come out of his basement to the street of the cul-de-sac where he was, in his socks, by the way, and give out samples to the neighborhood kids, friends of his own kids. So his highly sophisticated marketing that developed the product that was Buy was giving out samples to 8, 9, and 10-year-olds, and that was the feedback that evolved this product. I mean,
that's really a perfect focus group right there.
I'm launching a future billion-dollar company. Get the feedback from the 9 and 10-year-olds. So ultimately, partnered with Ben at an early stage, and here was a guy who was interested in accelerating his product. If you know anything about CPG, distributors control everything, along with the large CPGs like Coke and Pepsi. So what you see on shelf typically is not what is innovative or is what consumers is on the leading edge. It's typically what the large CPGs have told you that you want to drink.
Right.
That infuriated Ben, which is why he wanted to focus on Amazon right from the get-go.
Interesting.
And that sort of fueled our early iteration and our early testing. But here was a guy who was determined to make Amazon, to own that platform. So obviously we'll get into it and talk a little bit about a playbook that we developed on Amazon. But flash forward to 2016, and at that point we'd made Amazon Buy the number one beverage on Amazon, ahead of Coke, ahead of Pepsi, ahead of Gatorade, ahead of brands that had been around for generations. And what's striking about Amazon too is that there are no boundaries in terms of large CPGs or large companies. If you find the formula, you can create really, really rapid growth. So ultimately, that was one formula of our success. The company later that year exited for $1.7 billion. So it went from one guy in his basement in his socks to a 1.7 billion exit. Now, obviously, the Amazon strategy wasn't everything. I mean, there was brilliant
Right.
sales folks, brilliant marketing leads, lots of different things we did at later stages. But at the early stages, really the rocket fuel for us was this focus entirely on Amazon with a playbook that you and I, Nick, have talked about is very, very different from what I typically see out there, see folks use.
Right. I mean, it's the democratization of kind of the shopping experience, the shopper marketing experience. You can be an unknown brand coming straight out of a different country from America and set up your whole experience on Amazon, and all of a sudden, with the right marketing spend, potentially put yourself up above super well-known brands. I mean, Anchor dongles, right? Have we all seen those before? Like, where did they come from? And they're one of the brands now.
Amazing. And I'll tell you also a little story. Not only that, but Amazon has become the platform that influences everything else that's purchased. So, just an example, I was recently with my wife in Best Buy, and we were looking for headphones for my 12-year-old. So we decided there that we need to get patio speakers. So for our terrace. So 30 years ago, what would we have done? My wife would have walked over to the patio, to the speaker aisle, looked at some models, talked to the salesperson, looked around at everything, price, brand, and then made a choice. Well, what does she do in 2019? She pulls out her iPhone, fires up her Amazon app, does a search for outdoor patio speakers, filters for 4 stars, looks at the top 2 selections, including the bestseller flag, looks at a few reviews, and probably 120 seconds has made a decision. And oh, by the way, it's a brand we've never heard of before.
Right.
And she goes over to the aisle, finds it, and purchases it right there. And I'll tell you, part of the power of Amazon and what we discovered later after a lot of expensive marketing analysis. So when we were acquired by Dr. Pepper Snapple Group, they invested in marketing mix modeling to look at the impact of all the marketing we've done. And early on, I started with, a couple $100,000 and no money. By the end, I had a budget of 30 million, and I was buying Super Bowl spots with Justin Timberlake and Christopher Walken.
That's right.
So they looked at everything that we had done and analyzed it. And I said to the analyst when he spent like $500,000 on this report and 3 months of analyzing all impressions. Have you ever done marketing mix modeling? Impressions versus ad impressions versus sales data across all these channels.
Right.
And the analyst looks at me and goes, "Holy cow, Amazon! What did you guys do to drive this? This is amazing." And he said, literally, it was his theory that people would be walking into store, pulling the buy bottle off of the shelf, looking at this. And again, 30 years ago, they'd look at a new drink like this or see my Super Bowl spot with Justin Timberlake and Christopher Walken, and they go, 30 years ago, they go, "I'm going to go buy this stuff." Well, does that happen today? No.
Yeah.
The first thing they do is pull it off shelf, and they look at it and say, "Okay, this stuff's supposed to be good, antioxidants." Well, what's the real deal?
Yeah.
And my wife's out their iPhone. They're going to pull out the Amazon app. They're going to do a search and say, "Okay, erythritol and stevia are the sweeteners. What are they? Are they good for you?" And the Amazon forum, they break down every detail of our ingredients, talk about the impact on the body. They talk about, do we like this? Do we not like this? And the reality is today, Amazon is the vetting platform for products today, particularly in my space, high growth consumer product, good brands in the healthier for you segment. Consumers want to know the real deal. And just for my wife, it's the language that everybody is looking for and making decisions on. So we discovered that it was impacting all channels. It wasn't about what you were selling on Amazon. It was Amazon was influencing Target and Wegmans and Walmart and 11 and every other channel was influenced about what Amazon was saying about your product.
It's super interesting, especially the mobile front. I mean, we know now we've seen some interesting insight about how many conversions are happening on mobile. More than half of conversions are happening on mobile on Amazon. You think about that shopping experience when you're in the infinite scroll, you click into a product and you're swiping through photos. That's our kind of modern way of experiencing.
Exactly.
And those infographics can tell you so much. And so it's, you start looking at the different strategies that brands employ to tell you that story about the healthiness of the product, all through the swiping, et cetera.
And it's my personal theory that, the iPhone was invented 12 years ago. So, I've got my, not my 12-year-old, my 16-year-old, and my 15-year-old. And when my wife and I tell them there was a world without an iPhone, they look at us like we're the most primitive hominids that ever walked on the planet. Like, well, what'd you do? Even if we're going to take away my 15-year-old's iPhone, he's like, well, what am I going to do? Like,
yeah.
What do you do when you don't have an iPhone? And when you think about it, there's an always-on supercomputer in their pocket, connected to all the world's information, including Amazon and Yelp and TripAdvisor. They're growing up in a world where this information is completely accessible. And it's my theory that you got people running these food and beverage companies and large CPGs, but a lot of older folks who haven't yet grasped the enormous changes. If you look at the curve, and Forrester's done some great analysis of the influence of offline purchases, and the curve since the launch of the iPhone is unbelievable. And it's accelerating in the last couple of years, particularly the influence on millennial and Gen Z in terms of purchase patterns. And one of my sort of jihads is that typical large food and beverage companies, look at Amazon as a channel. And they look at it the same way as if I'm going to advertise through an off-shelf display in Target.
Right.
So a promo in Target, and therefore I spend $100 in Target, and I want to see $100 in sales in Target. And they put Amazon, and they say, well, it's just like doing an off-shelf display in there. I'm going to use shopper marketing dollars, spend 100, and I want to see that return. And that's the only way I'm going to use the Amazon platform, not getting the influence that it has on absolutely everything across all retail channels.
That's super interesting. And I think we just got a question come through from Jay. He's curious to see how you're connecting kind of all the online Amazon searches with other brick and mortar retail in-store, kind of like your wife's experience on Best Buy, or guiding that conversation with brands that want to see the data on why they should be putting more into Amazon. I know so certain companies of different scales. Maybe that's a question we could ask our audience. Feel free to comment. I would say like A, B, or C. A, if you're kind of spend sort of enterprise level in marketing. B, if you're you think you're probably mid-market, or C, if maybe you're a long tail seller. If you feel you want to comment that way, we can kind of make sure we're tailoring the conversation. But John, you've worked with some big budgets. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about this modeling and what you guys have used.
So, obviously, if you're a certain size marketer, this is the question. When you spend on Amazon, what is the impact that I'm getting in offline channels? And early on in 2013, it was a lot of theory. It's what we believe, that it was having a lot of impact. There was some data from Amazon at the time. They had done a lot of studies with Datalogix. So Datalogix, you can use their studies. It's online exposed tracking what you purchase. So they'll take a control group who's not exposed to the advertising and a group who's exposed, and they have a panel, and they can track everything that they're purchasing across all retail channels. So, Dynamic Logix has this. Nielsen has these brand lift studies. So I typically recommend these brand lift studies for folks who are trying to tell their management or show the case story.
Yeah.
But then,
John, I don't know if we lost you there, but hopefully the Wi-Fi issue is getting resolved here. Stay tuned, folks, if you can hear me. Well, folks, hopefully you can hear me. Maybe give me a quick comment. I think we have a technical issue with the Wi-Fi on one of our ends here, but just stay tuned briefly, and we'll get going. Really excited to hear the next bits of things that he was going to share with us on exactly how they're doing the media mixing. We just double check and make sure we are being heard. Looks like folks can probably hear me. Perhaps we're getting John coming back in. There he is. Hey, John.
I am back.
Yeah.
Hopefully the Earth didn't just have a massive earthquake or something.
Yeah. No, I was hoping it wasn't me. Sometimes those things happen, but we appreciate you folks sticking with us here. John, we were just picking up the conversation. Maybe we can jump a little bit more back into the kind of the buy and CAVU story conversation through your last few years. Talk maybe a little bit more about the way you were doing that media mixing. First of all, you were talking about like the data logics models, the panel data. I know there's a whole body of kind of data solutions out there that, you know, either claim to or have some sort of algorithmic approach to measurement. And certainly, you know, brand lift studies, especially trying to connect online and offline, are going to be key. Especially as these big grocery channels start to try to compete with Amazon with the offline sales data that they do have, or as online grocery pickup comes into the fore. It'll be interesting to see how these brands lean in on digital advertising to drive that offline grocery pickup as well.
And obviously, so much is changing now. If you talk about CPG, you know, with obviously the acquisition, Amazon's acquisition of Whole Foods in 2017 was the shot heard around the world. And we've seen Walmart and Target get religion in a way that is unbelievable. And now you see, you know, Walmart having click and collect, one day delivery. Target is doing the same. If you look at their earnings report, that segment of their business is exploding. Analysts are saying for Walmart, it's almost the biggest shareholder value unlock ever, because now consumers don't, I don't know about you, but Walmart is not my favorite place to shop, but they do have decent groceries. And I would order online and then pull up to the store and have someone load it into my car. So there's a whole new customer that they can potentially access. But what's happening is this is all moving to mobile platforms. I mean, it's like, here is where the decision is going to be made. And I was talking to a leader of a major agency who has like some of the largest CPGs. And when you talk about consumers going on their Walmart app for the first time to purchase groceries, I know my wife, we were early customers of Amazon, of Fresh Direct in New York City. And what she knew the first time she logged in, she would do a search for laundry detergent, see what they have, adds it to her list. She looked as a search for, at that time, it was like baby food, and add it to her list.
Right.
You're making choices that are going to be the default for potentially the next decade. And all the large CPGs know that they have to be there aggressively, because this is where all the territory and decisions are being made. So he was like, they're investing heavily and want to invest heavily across, you know, Walmart, as they're very nascent right now.
Right.
And developing a platform. Obviously, they're pretty far behind where Amazon is. But, you know, these are places like, this is where ground zero is right now in the whole space, as consumers shift rapidly to click and collect and picking up and having one day delivery for CPG.
They're farther behind on the media front, but they're, you know, almost twice as big on the physical footprint.
They're getting that they have to move quickly in this, looking at as a channel and e-commerce. You know, it's the question, you know, when we go back to sort of the formula of what we did at Buy, they're still looking at Amazon as the place. And you and I talked about this, Nick, where the vast majority of folks today, I saw some eMarketer data where 72% of the spend on Amazon advertising is on Amazon search. And Forrester released a report in September, and they said almost every consumer products company is getting religion about the power of Amazon search. But they said most people are not getting it when it comes to, you know, Amazon's programmatic offering.
Right.
That they're really lagging behind. And they said, Forrester said, literally, we couldn't talk to one major company who was using Amazon for branding. And if you talk about the playbook that we used to Buy, that we're replicating right now, there's a brand, One Bar, that I worked with for the last 2.5 years. That brand was a tiny player in the sports and nutrition space when we first, our team here at CAVU started working with them. By this past summer, we had driven them to be the top 4. They passed RX to become the top 4 bar on Amazon, and used that same playbook, and they exited to Hershey for $400 million. So had insanely rapid growth over the last 2 years. And again, that playbook is based on, and here's the big surprise, folks, it's programmatic. It's most folks out there are relying on search. And Nick, you and I talked about this, where search is so easy. It's quick response. It's, you know, you spend $1 and you can immediately see, what did I get back? And you and I were talking about my first experience with running search in 2013. I ran a campaign over a month. I spent $5,000 and looked at the ROAS numbers, and it was over 20,000. Holy cow! I'm going to get a promotion. And you know, the challenge is it's quick, it's short term, it's bottom of the funnel, it's converting people immediately, and there's a natural human inclination to focus all your energy on performance. And so I see people across the industry focused on performance. I see agencies focused on performance, to me, the detriment of growth.
And you can get amazing ACOS just bidding on your brand terms. Go back to the boss and say, "Look at my ACOS. They can get it."
Look at this.
Yeah.
Look at the metrics. I can go to my boss, and my boss can go to his boss. And you and I were talking about this, where I believe digital advertising has become rocket science. It is not simple anymore. This is highly, highly complicated. And to some CMOs, I think there are a lot of CMOs who don't understand this, and a lot of CEOs who don't understand it. So it's the natural instinct where the ecom manager goes to the CMO and says, "Well, look at the ROAS I got you, or the ACOS. Look how great this is." And he can say, "Well, CMO held you accountable to a number." And he can go to his CEO who doesn't get anything about this, by the way. The CEO's clueless, but all he knows is he knows ROAS. Like, you got to have that ROAS number. And the CMO says, "Check, boss, we got the ROAS." And it's like, it's people are doing this to the detriment of growth of their brand. Because
Right.
you and I talked, I can deliver you any ROAS number you want. I can buy brand terms and only certain levels of brand terms, and I'll give you exactly the ROAS you want. But am I getting growth? Am I driving hyper growth or rapid growth that I want? No. And plus, it's a strategy that you're sort of milking the bottom of the funnel. And at some point, I have portfolio brands that come to me and say, "Well, why isn't it working anymore? I was spending all this, and I was like milking the cow, and it was all coming and happening, and I had my job, and everybody was happy, and all of a sudden my numbers start going down."
Right.
And that's classic, because they haven't fueled the top of the funnel, they haven't driven users beyond to create awareness, and and to build the top of the funnel down to conversion.
Well, one of the biggest is measuring that. I love the analogy for folks, especially those CEOs that aren't necessarily thinking about marketing funnels all the time. You put that, let's use Slack, for example, puts a big billboard up on the 101 in SF. You're not going to measure how many more sales you got that quarter, right? Like, how long do you keep that billboard up? How many people got exposed over 3 months? So,
I love you and I talked. I think everybody, the focus, and you and I talked about the launch of Google in 2000. I was a heavy brand marketer in the 90s, spending on television and outdoor and a lot of broad, brand measures. All of a sudden, here comes Google, and okay, it's just I only pay when somebody clicks.
Mm-hmm.
And not only is it super targeted, but the intent is there. Holy cow, all the branding is free. Plenty of people saw it, but I don't pay for that. And so it's so accountable. And then we've moved so clearly into performance with all the sponsored ad units across Amazon, Walmart, Target, across all the retailers. It really is genius, because I believe we've talked about, when you look at the Amazon search result, the top sponsored brand position is there, it's paid.
Mm-hmm.
The two sponsored ad positions, they're all paid for, but it's very difficult to see that it's sponsored. I don't think most consumers even know, and they don't care. It's the first result that popped up. So it's very, very accountable. But there's this whole world of brand advertisers, and there's Mark Powers out there. I love what he talked about Podium. But there's a reason 90% of the dollars spent by brand advertisers is on brand advertising. That's why Nike does it. They're acquiring new customers. They're building affinity, and that doesn't happen instantaneously. It's like meeting my wife. If I met her for the first time and said, "Would you marry me?" It's like, it ain't going to happen. People are forgetting that you have to build impressions over time. And there has to be lots of touch. You have to be cycling and recruiting those new customers that ultimately then convert. And I believe there's so many performance folks who are just forgetting that top of funnel piece.
Right. I started my career in display advertising as well. And maybe one question I could ask you, that maybe from the back of my mind, like, you can't dip your toe in brand or exposure based advertising. I know, some people say there's a gap in the funnel sometimes on Amazon between the low funnel search opportunities with sponsored products versus DSP. You see Amazon trying to close that gap, but what do you think is the kind of minimum toe in the water to start getting into display advertising? How do you start laddering up to doing that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. We have a couple brands right now that we're working with. Now, the full disclosure is, so there's two models, as most folks may know. You can either buy display advertising and video advertising programmatically through managed services through Amazon and an Amazon advertising rep, or you can buy it through an agency. And the genius about the self-serve model through agencies is that there's no minimum order that an agency has to do, or a consultant. So we have agencies we work with, and we have some consultants who have access to the self-serve tools, which means you could spend a couple $1,000s and still begin to get data back. And Nick, you and I talked about this. I believe the model is evolving into both a search and programmatic combination, and it's an always-on combination. And that the bottom, like we're seeing right now, we're running remarketing, retargeting lines for some of our campaigns in complement to search, and the ROAS is incredible for that. And it's simple. User has done a search, they've come into the detail page, they've checked you out, they've gone off to do whatever they're going to do, and they happen to be a day later on AccuWeather or New York Times or Washington Post, and you see a display ad creative that allows a lot richer message, a lot richer branding message than simple catalog shot and headline that you get in a sponsored ad. And it brings them back and they purchase. I mean, there's a reason why that's such a genius tool in digital marketing. And so I think that's become the new basic. And I look at all my campaigns, and you and I talked about this. The discipline of programmatic display is so different from search. You think about it, and search is bought on a cost per click. You buy display advertising on a cost per thousand. So completely different. With search, you're running keywords. For display, you're picking segments of people. You're beginning to play around with the audiences that you want to target. Also, early on, we put a pixel on our website, our brand website, collected all that data. They crossed it with the Amazon audience to then go after folks who fit that profile once they profiled the segments.
And that's super valuable for especially CPGs that may not have a big D2C experience, but maybe they are getting enough of a volume, maybe call it 100,000 hits a month on a McCormick spices, but they don't sell McCormick spices there. Maybe it's a recipe site, but then all of a sudden now I'm getting retargeted display ads to go buy this on Amazon in my normal shopping experience.
Exactly. And so it's a whole different discipline. Then there's the creative aspect. We talked about sponsored ads are so simple. It's just a basic catalog, shot, which isn't glamorous, and then the catalog copy, which is like, it's the opposite of glamorous or branding. And display ads, you have the opportunity to tell more of a story, to build some emotion into it. That's what we try to do for all of our brands, and we did for Buy, is tell that story, be funny, be witty, don't bore people into buying something, so that when they just see the display ad, they're actually running a search, they're running a brand search, or they may not remember you exactly, but when they run the brand search, they see you and they're familiar, so they're more likely to choose you. But it's such a different set of disciplines, and I see so many folks who are very comfortable with search, comfortable with the way they do it, and it's such a new skill set that I always say, if I start a display campaign on January 1, I always wish I started it 6 months before and got in the pool and started swimming. And even with a small amount, even it's $5,000, so I can get the rhythm of working with a team, get used to what the signals are, figure out the targeting, experiment with things like similarities. I mean, Amazon has just been, as you and I talked about, Nick, releasing more and more tools. They were very conservative early on. It wasn't like Google, where you and I worked with. Google was job one was advertising, and they were dedicated right away to making that work. Amazon didn't really start developing until like 2011, 2012, when they were launched like in 2004. So they were very hesitant and debated about all these pieces. And it's only been the last 18 months to 2 years where they've released some of these tools like similarities and aggressive remarketing strategies. So they've got a ton of things in queue, and there are a lot of genius tools are just being released.
They made one of the most kind of genius and bullish decisions to say, as a retailer who gets co-op dollars in the traditional sense, and a lot of retailers are scared of this, by the way, when you think about, do I bring in site monetization and ruin the customer experience and the merchandise? Yeah. And Amazon said, you know what, I'm going to keep my retail experience and I'm going to still have co-op as a rider in those agreements. But by the way, brands, here's a bunch of tools to go spend billions of dollars on our platform to compete with each other. And they've proven that they will,
Exactly. And I believe Amazon is looking at, okay, here are the retail margins. Here's the advertising margins. Holy cow. Yeah. And if you look at that, when they release their earnings, it all goes into the other bucket. But that other bucket is skyrocketing. And it's Amazon Web Services and advertising that most analysts believe is the highest margin business for Amazon. And you and I have talked about, I'm thinking, because this is not even day one for Amazon. I think it's like the first dawn in terms of advertising on Amazon. Right. And they're now getting religion and they're seeing where this can all go. And you look at it, and you and I talked briefly about OTT, which is essentially sight, sound, and motion, full screen Kindle television, integrating the targeting of Amazon, and they're becoming what used to be ABC, CBS, NBC. They're doubling down on content. They're doubling down on ad-supported TV, IMDb TV, and it's all going to be tied. It's all tied into their ecosystem. So Jeff Bezos is going after this aggressively, and we're going to see enormous change over the next year.
Well, I don't know about you, but last winter I was on my Fire TV just because I love to do research like that, and I saw the big display ad in my, navigating that, and it was for basically the, their QVC option, right? The Amazon Live.
Amazon Live.
Yeah, and it was good. I was like, they're talking through products. I mean, you can imagine it's like you see some of these returns. But John, we're at the top of the hour. I think we could probably go for another half hour here or longer, chatting through some of these things. There were, a couple questions about ad tools to use. Please do, follow up in the comments on here. We can come through and talk to you a little bit about some of those tools. Obviously, we at Kenshu, are a solution ourselves for managing Amazon search and measuring Amazon display absent an API. We'd love to continue and follow up with you guys. We actually are having another Facebook Live event at 2 p.m. Eastern, discussing the Cyber 5 results with Kaz, our main data analyst out of Chicago. So please do join that. John Denny, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. A lot of fun.
Let's do it again. Let's do an hour next time. This is
awesome.
All right. Thanks.
Take care, everybody.
Bye. Thanks.